Gopichanna Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopichanna Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodhanandana Rajachanna Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jayrada Madhava Punjabi Hari Jayrada Gopichanna Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopichanna Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodhanandana Rajachanna Ranjana Yashodhanandana Rajachanna Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jayrada Madhava Punjabi Hari Jayrada Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopichanna Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopichanna Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodhanandana Rajachanna Ranjana Yashodhanandana Rajachanna Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jayrada Madhava Punjabi Hari Jayrada Madhava Punjabi Hari Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol Jai. So welcome to Tuesday morning's class. We are speaking from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we are on Canto 1, Chapter 8, and it's text 48. So I just want to get this book here. As the prayers by Queen Kunti. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 A reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, text number 48. Aho me pasya tajnanam riddhi radham duratmana parikasyaiva dehasya bahavya me kshonir katata. Aho me pasyata jnanam riddhi radham duratmana parikasyaiva dehasya bhavyo me kohinir kata. Aho me pasyata gyatam gyanam vriddhi radham duratmana paraksyaiva dehasya bahavyo me kshohinir hata. And the word for word. Aho,
Aho.
oh, me, my, pasyata, just see.
Just see.
Agyanam.
Agyanam.
What does that mean?
Knowledge, of knowledge.
Agyanam.
Oh, ignorance.
Ignorance, yes. Vriddhi.
Vriddhi, heart.
In the heart.
Heart.
Rudham.
Rudham.
Situated in.
Situated in.
Duratmanaha.
Duratmanaha.
What is that? Duratma.
Something to do with the soul.
Duratma is it was used to be hard-hearted, but here the translation is of the sinful. Parikyasya,
Parikyasya,
meant for others.
meant for others.
Eva,
Eva,
certainly.
certainly.
Dehasya,
Dehasya,
of the body.
of the body.
Bhavya,
Bhavya,
it's Bahu. Bahunam Janmanamanta. It means thousands. Many, many. May,
hey,
by me.
by me.
Akshini,
Akshini, warriors. Or
it's a combination of military phalanxes. In Akshini. Hata,
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 cutting.
killed.
Mhm.
So translation and purport. King Yudhishthira said, "O my lot, I am the most sinful man. Just see my heart, which is full of ignorance. This body, which is ultimately meant for others, has killed many, many phalanxes of men." And the purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki. A solid phalanx of 21,870 chariots, 21,870 elephants, 109,650 infantry, and 65,000 cavalry is called an Okshohini. And many Okshohinis were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Maharaj Yudhishthira, as the most pious king of the world, takes for himself the responsibility for killing such a huge number of living beings, because the battle was fought to reinstate him on the throne. This body is, after all, meant for others. While there is life in the body, it is meant for the service of others, and when it is dead, it is meant to be eaten by dogs and jackals or maggots. He is sorry because for such a temporary body, such a huge massacre was committed. Tells my Sri Guru Dehi Maha, I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the touch of his knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. This is pretty powerful situation, because we have to understand the whole context here, because you can imagine King Yudhishthira, for so many years in his life, he's surrounded by all these people like Dronacharya, Bhishma. From the time he was a kid, he was surrounded by these great warriors, and he was in the royal order. And although he was banished for so many years, still he came back, and he was still part of this whole story. And so you can imagine the kind of the shock. We often hear of post-traumatic stress disorder, but you can imagine the shock that he's in, that suddenly all these people are dead, and you can imagine the shock that he's in, that all these were killed on the battlefield. He's just after witnessing the destruction of 64 million people. It's something amazing. I mean, we can use examples to us. I was listening to somebody recently there who survived the Nagasaki bomb, and their mind is full of images of just after the bomb. People were just, their skin was falling off, and they were walking up to them, and actually this person, a couple of people asked them for some water. They were in this horrific situation, so the person gave them water only as a young girl. And of course, that's the worst thing you can do. They took water and they just all dropped dead. So you can imagine the kind of what Yudhishthira has experienced. I mean, generally, it's these are warriors, so they're used to killing, whereas the normal person would not be used to any type of killing. And that was one of the things they found both in Vietnam War and some of the other wars, that people just couldn't kill, because it just wasn't in their nature to kill other people, and so therefore you had so much trauma after wars because of the impact that wars can have on people. I remember one friend of ours was was an Irishman who went over to America in the 60s to make some money basically, but because they were in America in the 60s, they got drafted into the war in Vietnam, and he explained to me when they were going over on the boats to Vietnam, the pastor and all the other people were saying to him, now this is a just war, you should kill now, there's no problem here, killing is okay, you know, these people have been totally against God and whatever. So you can imagine the Vietnamese are saying the same thing in their own language to their Vietnamese people. So they're all trying to hype each other up for war. So he was saying that this is what they were doing. And of course they were called gooks, you know, just gooks. They were trying to reduce them into insignificant people so that they could be killed, you know. So this is the type of thing that which goes on when the killing, because nothing can prepare you for that kind of situation. And I remember that it's said that after the World Wars that the people never actually speak about it. Survivors of the Holocaust, sometimes it took them 10, 20, 30 years before they said anything, because they just wanted to get it out of their mind, and they couldn't live with it. It was just so horrific. So that just sort of sets the scene for Yudhishthira. He's surrounded by God. God is around him. Krishna is around him there, and Krishna's after authorizing everything, and he's been on the victorious side. But his own sons have been killed. His grandson has been killed as well, has almost been killed. So Yudhishthira is in a state of shock, and it's very hard to try to get him out of that. And Prabhupada is. In the translation is, I'm the most sinful man, just see my heart, which is full of ignorance. This body, which is ultimately meant for others, has killed many, many phalanxes of men. And Prabhupada in the purport goes on to explain how we are meant for others. Like basically he said that when the body dies, it's meant for others. Okay, so there's a lot of cremation goes on as well, but in some parts as well, the body's just thrown out for the dogs and the jackals and the vultures, basically, to have something to eat. You know, make good use of the body, a good fertilizer. So therefore, it's not meant for us. It's actually not belong to us ultimately. We're just in this body for a while, but the body is belong to nature, and for this temporary body, such a huge massacre was committed. But also it says that the body is, after all, meant for others. It is meant for when it is alive, it is meant for service of others. That's quite an amazing concept, that the body is meant for service of others, because generally we find that people are selfish. One of the sales trainers from years ago said that people are generally lusty, greedy, and selfish, and so that's what you have to, when you're selling, that's what you couch your sales onto, that to the lower nature of people. It's you can see even. I usually take this example because I'm affected by it myself. When you see cars, various cars that people have, okay, you can take clothes, you can take hairstyles or anything. People want to have the best, not for the guy down the road. Like some of my immediate neighbours are changing their interiors at the moment. They didn't come in and say, "Can I change your interior for you? I'll pay for it all." You know, they're generally looking after themselves. Yeah, I have to look after my family. My nation, my species. So this is just tends to be the mood in people, and that is why such a lot of training has to go on in childhood, basically from childhood to youthhood, Common and Matura Prabhu, is that the training has to be there from early on, that we are meant to serve others. I heard a recent story about a famous philanthropist. his name was Feeney, Chuck Feeney. He was very famous in Ireland because he gave literally billions of pounds to Ireland to try to help with the economic downfall because of the wars that was going on in Ireland in the north. And he was a very successful business person, and he had a fortune in the 80s of about $8 billion. But what he did was he actually he gave it all away. He actually gave everything. He set up a foundation to give everything away, and only last week was the last amount of his money given away. It took him all that time to distribute all this money, and he didn't have a car or he didn't own a house. But his mother, when he grew up, his mother was very generous. She worked with the Red Cross. She was always doing good to the neighbourhood and so on. So that he picked up on that, and then in that way, he took on this mantle. Of course, it's an extraordinary thing to do because most people are holding on to their wealth for so many different things. But but ultimately, we also know that it is Shama Eva Ikevalam from this. It is an initial stage. It's said in the Bhagavad Gita, if you can't do this, then do this. If then just act selflessly. It's said in the Bhagavad Gita in the 12th chapter. So it is along the way towards devotional service. It is not actually devotional service. So, but perhaps during all his giving away, he might have given some money to the devotees somewhere, or bought a book or whatever, or done something for some spiritual society. And whatever he's done in that way to help the transmission of love of God, that will have been to his benefit. But in general, we know that people are in the opposite kind of camp, and they want to keep things for themselves. And then even at the very end, you know, you so don't want to give anything away. You often hear that hoarders are people who don't want to give anything away. They just collect things. They collect things in their house or whatever it is, and the reason for that is because they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave the body. They're just attached, you know, and they're afraid, you know, that you know it'll be taken away or something. So these are the and that was the thing that this guy Chuck Feeney was, that the last robe has no pockets, you know. I remember Prabhu used to speak about that the last gown that you have doesn't have any pockets in because you can't take anything with you. So Yudhishthira, of course, as we all know, was always thinking of other people. So that's also why it's playing on his mind here, because he thinks that's his natural tendencies to try to help people. He's the king. He's the executive head. His whole mood is ultimately for the welfare of his citizens, and we notice even in the political situation today, we see people that some of these politicians I remember Margaret Thatcher, she would only sleep for 4 hours because she was so much into ruling the country, and you know, so-called, you know, a public servant. A lot of them actually take on that mantle, and they give out humongous amounts of hours to try to appease the public. But ultimately, they're trapped by this whole system of being elected, and because of this election tendency, they're always trying to get elected. So everything they do is so that they can become elected the next time. So their role as public servants is always very poor. And then again, the other side, if they don't get elected, then they become despots. You know, they become so used to the perks of serving others and of being praised by others, they think that they're God Almighty, and then they get stuck into that kind of mentality then afterwards. So King Yudhishthira was not in that kind of category. He was a saintly king. Imam Rajarshayo Vidu Sakalanina Mahata Yoga Vaishna Parantaba. You know, he was a saintly king, and therefore he wanted to use his life in the service of others, the actual service of others. And these are the examples that we use and that we try to follow. As a devotee, that's what we were thinking. We're thinking, he reasons ill who says that not Vaishnavas die while they are living still and sound. A Vaishnava dies to live, and when living, learns to spread the holy name around. You know, so that's the service that we try to follow. I was listening to, just very briefly, to a tape by Sheshika Prabhu last night, and it was in this this whole particular program which they set up to give out sets of Bhagavatams everywhere, and they absolutely smashed the record on what they were trying to achieve, because they had achieved it on a worldwide basis, and they gave out absolutely literally so many sets of Bhagavatams. And he was saying that it was the cooperation among the devotees which was the most amazing thing. And what he did was, he said, we devotees, to work together, have to put down their own false ego. They have to sublimate it to the higher good of cooperation. So cooperation is like that. We somehow have to put aside our own kind of tendency to want to be the center, and just to put that in the service of the whole of giving out these Bhagavatams. And so this was a fantastic example of that happening, because no one was thinking of doing that, of giving out sets of Bhagavatams. It was kind of on the back burner, maybe some places, but because he actually saw the need for it, and because he saw it as a very important service to Krishna and Srila Prabhupada, he rallied the troops around and took all the austerities along with all his devotees who work with him, and garnered this cooperation among devotees, and then they actually gave out absolutely tons and tons and tons of Bhagavatam sets. I actually didn't actually get the figure, but it's in the tens of thousands anyway. And so we can see that as a service that he would take up to others, because he's following his spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, whose desire was that all these books would be in every household, in every town and village. As we know, Lord Chaitanya's his holy name will be sung, but also, in order for the holy name to be sung, it needs to be this philosophy needs to underpin it as well. They're both Shravanam Kirtanam. They're both very much hand in hand. The most important aspect is to chant 16 rounds and to hear from Srimad Bhagavatam. Because without the hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, we don't have really the groundwork, the understanding, and the foundation from which to chant. Because we have to hear in the association of devotees, and we have to hear from the great souls, because they can give us insight into how to act in time and circumstance. And in the association of devotees, as we can see, there can be great encouragement. Now there can be discouragement as well, so we have to be very careful that we're the right association, and we associate properly. That's an art, and that's a skill which is learned. It is a purification, which does go on among the devotees, but we need to have that higher taste, and the guidance, and the training by which we can live peacefully in the association of devotees, and we can learn to respect and honor Srinada Pisa Nichinata Rola Pisa Hishna Mani Namanadina Kirtaniya Siddhari. And we should also honor devotees. We should, Prabhupada one time said that we should give our association to devotees who are not so advanced as we are in our situation. We should make friends with devotees on the same level, and we should glorify devotees on a higher level, where unfortunately the tendency is to deride people who are not so advanced. We compete with people who are on the same level, and we also then
criticize the leaders.
we what?
Criticize the
We
leaders.
criticize leaders. Yeah. So these things are there, and we only have to go into the divine and demonic natures to see that in full bloom. How the people are trying to promote themselves up, puff themselves up as being greater than they actually are. But as we see from Yudhishthira Maharaj here, he says that we are actually only food food for the worms, and whatever permanency we're trying to achieve here in the world is greatly mistaken. I'd like to also take another part of this philosophy. I'm reading at the moment in the 6th canto, and it's a particularly powerful section because I'd like to just refer to it here. Because it talks about devotional service. There's a famous verse 6:3. Actually, it's not as famous. All verses are famous, but this was a verse which struck me as it should have been more famous than it is. Like sometimes I hear these verses and a lot, and I think, oh yeah, that's a great verse. This one is Etavan evalokeshnin pungshang dharma parakshmita bhakti yoga bhagavati tan nama gahanadivi. Devotional service is Yamaraj instructing his messengers. Beginning with the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is the ultimate religious principle for the living entity in human society. So devotional service, beginning with the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is the ultimate religious principle for the living entity in human society. The reason I brought this in is because Prabhupada in the Prabhupada was talking about Yudhishthira and service to others. So devotional service, the main service is serving Krishna, of course. He's the main other. He's the capital O, serving others. Because that's where we will actually get some understanding. I'll just read a little of the purport. As stated in the previous verse, Dharma and Bhagavatam, real religious principles are Bhagavad Dharma, the principles described in Srimad Bhagavatam itself or in the Bhagavad Gita, the preliminary study of Bhagavatam. What are these principles? The Bhagavatam says that Dharma projita kaitravo tranya matsaranam satam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam there are no cheating religious systems. Everything in the Bhagavatam is directly connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavatam further says, Savai pungsam paro dharmo yato bhaktirat hokshate ahaitikiya pratiyata yayatma suprasidati. The supreme religion is that which teaches the followers how to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the reach of experimental knowledge. So this is the point that's starting to happen, is this love of Krishna. That's what devotional service is, bhakti yoga, devotional service. Such a religious system begins with the Tanama Grahana, chanting of the holy name of the Lord, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam. So, after chanting the holy name of the Lord and dancing in ecstasy, one gradually sees the form of the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord, and the transcendental qualities of the Lord. That was one of the lines which most struck me in the purport, because it's not that we just keep on chanting in isolation and we just keep on just chant, and nothing happens. Prabhupada very much explained this in very early on, and he's explaining it here. That when we're chanting, then it's not that Krishna is not present. Krishna is present. Krishna is non-different from his name. There's no difference. It's just that we don't realize that when we're chanting. We think it's, I'm just going to chant. How many rounds have you left? I've got so many rounds left. Okay, I'm just going to do them now. You know? It's like Krishna is non-different from his name. God, the whole supreme source of everything, is there in that name. So you want to talk about a gift this morning? That's the gift that's there. That's the ultimate. You're a billionaire. We're billionaires. We have God. You know, we are multi-billionaires, trillionaires, zillionaires. That's what the holy name is, the God. You know, and so it's not that then God is just the name, form, qualities, pastimes. It's amazing the way Prabhupada has put it this. After chanting the holy name of the Lord and dancing in ecstasy, one gradually sees with the inner eye the form of the Lord, Krishna is appearing, the pastimes of the Lord, you know, and the transcendental qualities of the Lord. And also, the whole parampara is there as well in the chanting. and they are so, we have so many great saints and sages, and they're all there, and they're all, you know, willing us on, giving us strength, giving us potency, empowering us, basically. Because they want, this is their desire, that the holy name is spread to in every town and village of the world, you know. And so we've often, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talked about the society of devotees and who they are. I forget the name that he had on them, but some Sanskrit or Bengali name, I can't remember. But he really spoke about it as a living force, you know, that he reasons in, who says that Vaishnavas die when they are living still and sound. So we understand that the whole parampara is there, you know, in the holy name as well. So in that sense, we are very fortunate to be part of this particular group, and we need to become enlivened, enlightened, informed. The knowledge appears to the devotees who are pure in heart, and that's why this whole emphasis is on the holy name, especially in this 6th chapter as well, 6th canto. This way one fully understands the situation of the personality of Godhead. One can come to this understanding of the Lord, how he descends into the material world, how he takes his births, and what activities he performs. But one can know this only by executing devotional service. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti Mama Vijanati Avanyastasi Tatmataha. Simply by devotional service one can understand everything about the Supreme Lord. If one fortunately understands the Supreme Lord in this way, the result is Chaktva Deham Punarjanma Naiti Mamati Savarjana. It means that we will go back to the spiritual world. You know, one who knows the transcendental nature of my payments and activities does not take birth in this material world, but goes back again to the spiritual world. He no longer has to take birth in this material world. Instead, he returns back to Godhead. That is the ultimate perfection. Therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 8:15, Mamu Pecha Punar Jama Jukala Yama Shasvatam Napnunanti Mahatmanaha Sanksitim Paravam Pati. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So the whole idea of devotional service is to increase our attachment for Krishna. Even if we only have a tiny little attachment for Krishna, just by chanting and by hearing, that attachment increases. And that is our actual wealth. That is the wealth of the Brahmanas. Just that attachment that we have for Krishna. And therefore we increase our love for Krishna. We may say, I have no love for Krishna. That's a natural mood from the devotees, and they can easily cite their upbringing, their backgrounds, how they've lived so much of their life, you know, how they haven't loved Krishna and so on. But still, that love is there, and we should try to increase that love. That's what devotional service does. It increases our attachment for Krishna, increases our love for Krishna, and Krishna says that our dormant love for Krishna is then awoken in our hearts. Because it's there. Unfortunately, you can't deny it. You know, devotees are very humble sometimes, but they can't deny that the dormant love for Krishna is there. So that's your birthright. That's who you are. If anyone, and I think a lot of us are in that situation, we have a low sense of self-esteem, but we have to ultimately, and sometimes we confuse that with humility. But we have to get rid of that, because it's the dormant love for Krishna is there in our heart, and we are by nature pleasure seeking. We're by nature servants of Krishna, and we have a relationship with Krishna, and that relationship is in perfection. So that is the reality of who we are. So if we are sometimes we can become crippled by that, even as devotees, sometimes we kind of, we don't realize our full nature as servants of Krishna. But the more that we hear about our actual nature, then the more we will feel it as well. The more we will experience it, and then the more confident we will become through that experience, and then the more that we will be able to take on different service for Krishna and service for the spiritual master, which is to give Krishna consciousness to others. The less likely we will be lazy, or the less likely we will not be sharp, attentive, clean, all the qualities of the mode of goodness, because that's really what is happening. Is sometimes we put down humility, but it's actually the mode of ignorance or the mode of passion. We've often heard of this phrase that the head in the clouds, but we have to have our feet on the ground. It's like our feet stuck in the mud. Or we often hear the phrase that goodness masquerading as ignorance masquerading as goodness. It can happen like that. We can somehow or other take this. Oh well, I'm not performing any activity because I'm meditating on Krishna. No, that's not what it is. It's practical action in the foreground of spiritual life. That's Prabhupada speaks about that in the Nectar of Instruction. That we in other words, that the more that we take to Krishna consciousness, the more that we will have clarity, and the more that we will have vigor and life to perform devotional service. We will less likely be, there's one phrase from St. Francis of Assisi, not to seek rest all the time, because the mind is always looking for a break, always wants to, the mind needs a break from time to time, but generally we want to space out, that's that word, space out. Now we should have recreation, obviously, he is regulated in his eating, in his various aspects of his life, regulation, work. There should be some recreation there. But my experience is that a lot of my life has been the mode of ignorance masquerading as spirituality. And so the more that I go on, the more I see that I need to be alert and to Krishna conscious, because it's awake, we become more awake to Krishna consciousness, and that is just a technique. We have to be aware there of how to remain in Krishna consciousness, how to stay in Krishna consciousness, how to get to Krishna consciousness, but how not to let the mind or the modes of nature try to fool us or trick us into some sort of miserable ease, some ease in Krishna consciousness. Prabhu used to say, an easy life and Krishna consciousness don't go well together. You have to be knocking on doors, or knocking at doors, in the sense of knocking down obstacles which are preventing us from so we should make plans with determination and try to carry out those plans, even on a daily basis. We should have our lists ready for what we're going to do the next day, so that we can actually perform those activities, tick them off one by one, so that we can achieve things for Krishna in Krishna consciousness. And the more that we become expert at that, then the more effective we will be as devotees in the world. So these are just some of the things that I took from this verse, and just around this section as well. Dharma to Shakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. These how to perform devotional service, we can take shelter of the Mahajans. Lord Brahma, Bhagavan Narada, Lord Shiva, the four Kumars, Lord Kapila, Swayambhuva Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janaka Maharaj, Grandfather Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Shukadeva Goswami, and I myself, this is Yamaraj talking, know the real religious principle. My dear servants, this transcendental religious principle, which is known as Bhagavat Dharma, or surrender unto the Supreme Lord and love for Him, is uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. It is very confidential and difficult for ordinary human beings to understand. But if by chance one fortunately understands it, he is immediately liberated, and thus he returns home back to Godhead. So this is Yamaraj speaking. So soon we're going to hear from one of the other Mahajans, which is Bhishma, who was mentioned here. So this is what it says here. He says that they're difficult for ordinary human beings to understand, which is us. It's difficult for us to understand it. But if by chance one fortunately understands it, he's immediately liberated and he returns home back to Godhead. So we're in that position, we're in a good situation, so we should try to, as much as possible, try to take advantage of the situation that we're in, and make our list for the day, make our plans with determination, try to please Krishna, take the example of Vaisheshika Prabhu, take on great things for Krishna, and just put them into action. And also, steady means great as well. Be steady in our Krishna consciousness. That's the greatest thing. Okay, so I'll stop there, and thank you very much for listening today. There's a question. Krishna.
I have a question.
Shani has a question.
You see if anybody else has. No. So I'm just maybe an unusual question. I was just wondering, what would you say would be the Krishna conscious perspective on organ donation? You're talking about the body after death,
Right.
cremation. You're talking about throwing to the vulture. You're talking about being of service. You think that organ donation would be a wonderful service posthumously.
Posthumously, yes.
Yeah.
So organ donation.
What is
Shani's
that?
asking us that because in the purport or in the verse it talked about, Prabhu was saying about the body being useful to others, it's a service to others when dead. I was thinking about that. I remember a famous footballer got a liver recently, or a little while ago, and because he shot his other liver because he drank so much alcohol, and so then with his new liver he did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, would it be would you get some of the karma for giving him your liver?
Because
Used
Shama Sundar got a liver
no,
transplant.
Shamasundar, that's different, of course, because he's a devotee,
Well, he received a transplant.
from a devotee, yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking more like of the heart, because our understanding is that the soul is situated in the heart.
Yeah.
Although it's not literally there, it is in the heart. And
Would a devotee soul, would a devotee heart be a good donation to somebody who could help them, make them some advancement, because
does
the
the
soul
heart
is in
hold?
the heart.
Does the heart hold the emotions?
I did read something like that, but Prabhupada does give that example when he was asked that about when there was heart transplants. He explained that the soul leaves one heart and goes into the next heart. So if this actual soul goes into the next heart, now whether that soul is affected by the new heart is a question. I think it would be only marginally. It would seem that it wouldn't be a huge difference, even though the soul that was in it previously was a devotee soul, and what somehow would have affected that heart. But still, the other soul goes into that heart. There may be some advancement.
So are we favourable to organ donation?
Are we favourable to it or
Unfavourable?
not?
Are we neutral? Or
I think it's one of those things that if someone came to that conclusion about it, and they felt that it would be of benefit, I don't think anybody would criticise them too much. I personally would.
But then the body can't be cremated, can it?
Well, that's the other thing I was going to think of. That, like, if you prefer your body cremated, so that is a natural.
And there's a reason
function.
for
There is a
cremation,
reason
isn't
for
it?
cremation, exactly. Yeah.
So then the organ donation seems to be.
Yeah, it seems to be the
contradictory.
second best option. It wouldn't be the better option. I think cremation would be a better option anyway. Or whether you're thrown to the dogs or the vultures, burial. It'd be good fertilizer for the land in Inishrath, maybe. It's said that humans are good fertilizer, so would that be the best thing to do? To get buried there. But I haven't seen the acharyas do that, The only persons who don't, of course, are pure devotees, and they're in Samadhi. Yeah, that's a totally different situation. So they're in Samadhi. So
is the jury out about organ donation?
It wouldn't be a normal situation. I'm sure no one would be, killed for doing it, or killed. No one would be wouldn't be a mortal sin if he did it. And I think it would be reasonably. And I'm just speaking now personally. I'm not speaking from the scripture, but from my understanding, I don't think it would be a terrible thing to do. But it wouldn't be a normal thing to do, so I would just stick with tradition personally. And
I was
Go into the oven.
I was reading up a little bit on dental procedures yesterday, and they talk about, you know, in some cases of implants, bone grafting is required, and they talked about cadaver bones.
Cadaver bones?
Yeah.
What's that?
Dead bodies or cadavers.
Oh, dead bodies.
Dead bones of dead bodies, you know?
Yeah.
And they, obviously, if they're doing it, they, you know, even the cadavers are euphemism for, you know.
No, there's a lot of devotee dentists, I know, over in the UK, so...
They use another euphemism, bovine, you know.
Oh my God.
Or part of your own body, or...
Part of your own body.
The cadaver one really made...
So anybody who's going to get implants,
they
you've got to do a bit of research on that.
You definitely do, because unless you say you want some artificial material, they will, you know, put anything in there.
So there you go. That's you know, that's very important for living in the world, because people do get implants, and you don't want to take on somebody else's. Have to come back to give them the bit of your teeth or something.
Dead bones in your body.
Yeah, definitely.
In your mouth.
Okay, so.
Oh, wait a minute, there's something here. Is saying something?
Ananda says,
it appears that the subtle body is much more powerful than is understood in modern times. Would you agree that it remains intact even if the heart is removed? The subtle body. It appears that the subtle body is much more powerful than is understood in modern times.
yeah.
Would you agree that it remains intact even if the heart is removed?
Yes, that the subtle body remains intact if the heart is removed. That's the reality, because you know the subtle body, you know, takes the living entity, the soul. Yeah, it's very powerful, because it transfers the soul into the next body. That's quite an operation. I mean, the subtle body transfers the soul. Can even see the soul, or you know, has potency over the soul to bring it to the next body. Yeah, I mean it's not even observed. The subtle body is there's not very much credibility given to that in modern science, as far as I can see, because they only seem to take the you know, the material. Gross material body as the all in all. Although we have seen them through to Karma Prabhu and Richard Thompson, Sadhaput, when they definitely through to Karma, he wrote this book, and he was using examples from out of body experiences about people who remember the previous bodies, and so on. He was using a lot of that type of science, and it is a science, and he was proving things from it. But in the mainstream, they weren't accepting that so much. You know, they weren't accepting that as proof. So
they weren't accepting what?
They weren't accepting those examples of proof, how the living entity you know, goes into another body, whereas they could remember so many different things from their previous life, and it went back and was proved their remembrance of their previous life. But that's maybe something which is starting to come strong again, you know, because there's so many things that they cannot understand, or they just cannot give any proof of.
Pandemic.
Except through the subtle sciences. They talk about psychology. There's a whole science of the mind, which they can't see, but they realise exists, and they understand like even though as I was talking about earlier, which is trauma, you know, and people how they get hurt, you know, through trauma, which is just as bad as the trauma that one can get if one's arm is cut, or you know, if one gets a broken bone, a broken So they understand that the mind is actually there. They have that understanding, but they obviously don't go any further than that. Now, when the heart, the heart transplant, I mean, I haven't heard about some sciences or some studies that were done at that time. I wonder, there probably was done. Did a person's character change when they got a heart transplant? I wonder. And I think there may be some kind of something to do with that, all right. But that's where the Krishna consciousness is starting to make impact in the world. Just like vegetarianism, just like karma, reincarnation, and so on. That's how the Krishna consciousness movement may not be big, mainstream, but these ideas that we're presenting into the world, we're presenting to people in general, they start to appear all over the place. People starting to use what's in the Bhagavatam, start to use Bhagavad Gita, the science of Bhagavad Gita. They start to use that in their everyday language, and it starts to appear in different cultures as well. So, whereas today it may not be really, to the fore. In the future, it does seem to be gaining a lot more traction. Thanks, Prabhu, for that comment, question. Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. So, may you have an amazing day to increasing your attachment for Krishna, increasing your love for Krishna, awakening the dormant love for Krishna, and gradually seeing the form and pastimes of Krishna. Hare Krishna. Jai. Can you press the button, Shweta?